The topic of this video is abstract thinking in arts. I have created many videos about abstract thinking, but none of them was about arts. So some people in the comments wrote about that they have difficulties to understand abstract thinking or abstraction in arts and how they can relate. But they understand that, let's say, in science 1 plus 1 is 2, but in arts how can they apply abstract thinking? So in this video I'm trying to address this issue. In all thinking, all abstract thinking, there are commonalities but also differences. So let's say in mathematics it's a lot of things about concepts, the relationship between concepts, creating theories, abstract theories, and applying these theories. And it's more often quantifiable. But in arts, for example music, there is no this kind of quantity. It's more about hearing. So it's a different dimension, it's a different way of understanding music or enjoying music or creating music. The same as paintings, photos, videos, this is visual. So just because we use the word abstract art or abstract thinking in art, it doesn't mean that we mean exactly the same thing as in other parts. So there are some commonalities and there are some uniqueness. So the uniqueness is about, in art, we usually use sense organs, visual and touch and hearing, and in other parts of life, let's say mathematics, or thinking about emotions, what causes emotion, it's more about understanding something in a conceptual level. So they are concepts. So these are the differences. Now the similarities, that we have life experience, we have a lot of knowledge, so we recognize patterns and create mental models in our minds, some understanding, maybe we modify. So for example, you want to start a business, you need abstract thinking because you have a lot of experiences about businesses, like as a customer, and then you create your own business. It means that you create a mental model, a business model of your business, and then you implement in the real life. In arts, you heard a lot of music, if you are a musician, and you understand patterns, you understand how to do it. You spend a lot of years mastering the techniques and maybe even concepts of that domain, and then you create your own art. So what is common in all of them is that you have real life experience about reality. You use your mind to understand the patterns, how it works, and then you think and you create something new in your mind first. So you create in your mind and then you create in reality. So for example, you can abstract emotions. You want to understand what are the common things in emotions. Let's say emotions that you don't want. So you can abstract like sadness, anger, fear, frustration, anxiety, hate, these kind of things, and you find out, for example, an abstract level, that the cause of them are the thing that you want something but you don't get it, or you don't want something and you get it. So it's something that your expectation have not met. So you do this as an abstraction. Now, so art is different in a way that you create something that there are no clear rules, no, like in mathematics you have clear rules, or maybe grammar, mastering the learning a new language. there are grammar rules, you have to memorize words, but arts, you don't have too much restriction. So if somebody has no problem understanding, let's say, mathematics in an abstract level and applying this, it is because this person likes limitation. They can have some signpost, they can have proof, they can test the things, so they can by themselves really understand whether they are right or wrong. But in arts, when you create something, there is total freedom. Okay, so you create a music, and whatever you do, you created. So you applied abstract thinking. So, of course, the test will be whether people like it or you like it, but no any other more way of testing and understanding. So I usually understand this, that people, when I give too much freedom, they don't know what to do. So for example, when I have a student and ask them, okay, make a 5-minute speech about whatever you want to talk about, usually they have no idea what to talk about, so they just sit there and they don't create anything. But if I make it more specific, so I give limitation, constraint, that tell me, how did you meet with your girlfriend? Okay, or what happened yesterday? So when you give limitations or something that they can relate to, then it's much easier. Yes, of course, in arts you can look at the works of other people and try to copy, but when you create your own piece of arts, maybe it also can be performance art, that you are dancing or singing, or you create a photo, you write a book, then there are no this kind of rules. You create, whatever you create, it exists. And of course the market will decide whether they like it or not, but there is no this kind of certainty. Like that is one difference, that let's say in mathematics it's relatively certain that Pythagoras created his Pythagoras theory, but there are some basic assumptions that it's a plane two-dimensional field, so a squared plus b squared equals c squares, and so it's an abstraction process, looking at a lot of specific example, created this, and the people who use this in a school, the Pythagorean theory, they use this abstract idea, these rules, and apply in real life, and they can verify somehow that they created something. So there is something that you can look at and use it as a guidance. But in art, okay, you create a piece of music, then what? So you created, it exists, and it's total subjective. This is also because, let's say so back to the mathematics, so there are always some basic axiom, something that you assume that it's true, that the Pythagorean theorem is in 2 dimensions. Maybe it doesn't work in 3 dimensions on the Earth's surface, but you understand the constraints, and then you create something, you apply something. So it's very straightforward. You have proof. You can have evidence that it works or not. But in art, you are totally free. Now, so let's say that what is abstraction? Because in art, it is not just you who abstract, but the consumer of your piece of art. For example, you create a piece of music, and maybe your intention is that it sounds like a forest, the birds are singing. So you create in this, you compose this music, and yeah, it has some similarities, but it's an abstraction. Of course, it's not real birds. It is the musical instruments create this sound. And then of the people who are listening to your music, maybe they get it, and maybe they also can create in their mind that, hey, it's like a forest and there are some birds, without you telling them what was your intention, but maybe not. So in art there is a second abstract thinking, is the abstract thinking of the people who use and watch your art, listen to your art, touch your art. So that is at two levels. Now, in business, of course, you also have that business model. It's a mental model, a business model, and the people will go to your restaurants and either they like it or not. So there is also a kind of feedback. So if you still have difficulties with abstract thinking in art, my suggestion is that forget the word abstract. Just thinking, because every thinking is abstract thinking. It's happening in your head with concepts and visual elements or internal sounds. So they have very different dimensions. So forget the word abstract thinking. It's just thinking in art. So, and then you can think about that, creating the main idea, what you want to create, like a movie or a piece of music, and then thinking about the details, the process, the creation process, and then when you create, and of course there is the audience, they also have to be able to create, they have to think to really enjoy what you have created. Okay, so if you understand it's what I'm talking about is about talking about abstract thinking in an abstract way. The specific way of abstract thinking is when you go to a very specific domain. It is more specific, like music. So they have their own methods, how to create, how to use abstraction. But again, don't get stuck too much about the word of abstraction. It is more about creation. So how can I create a piece of art? How can I create a great painting that people like and maybe they also pay money for me? That is much more useful and practical than thinking about how can I apply abstract thinking in music. I don't really understand the point. It is just thinking. So whatever you create, there is always experience, understanding, mental process in your head, trying in real life, and then you created something. And sometimes there is other people who are involved, and they also have to be able to catch. So maybe in art is something that you really, not just what you create, a piece of sculpture or painting, but you really have to understand other people's thinking. So you are abstracting other people's mind. So that's why if you really, and also marketing. So it's not about just the people look at your painting, but you have to really market. It means that create a kind of value about you or your piece of art in people's mind, and then they can appreciate. Because actually as an artist, what you want, of course you want money, but you also want people to appreciate your piece of art. And it is not about just creating something, but creating the value in people's mind about you as an artist and the specific piece of art, so they really love it, they appreciate, and then you can be famous and rich. So don't stuck too much about this abstraction word. It's not very useful.